Last video we discussed the rivalry of France and Great Britain, which led to the French and Indian War and the effects each of the losing countries felt. But what about the colonists and the British? Of course, the British will acquire most of New France from the French and Florida from the Spanish, but the country is really hurting after spending a ton of money on this war and others. Think about all the costs that go into fighting a war. The pay for soldiers, weapons, ammo, food, uniforms, training, shipping, and so on. So how are the British going to find the money to pay off this war? New taxes on the colonists would be the answer. The two major taxes right after the war would be the Stamp Act of 1765 and the Townshend Acts of 1767. The Stamp Act would tax all printed goods such as newspapers, wills, playing cards, and even dice, while the Townshend Acts would tax all tea, glass, and paper. In the past, new taxes like the Navigation Acts led to more illegal activity from the colonists, for example, smuggling. So to prevent this, the British also added the sugar tax of 1764. This actually lowered the taxes on sugar and molasses in the colonies, but allowed the British to take any goods that they believed were smuggled in without any warrants or court cases. The next issue becomes, how would the British enforce the Sugar Act and prevent smuggling in the colonies? So they created a law called the Writs of Assistance, which allowed British soldiers to search anywhere they wanted for illegal goods. Prior to the French and Indian War, British soldiers were rarely stationed in the colonies. However, many were left there to keep the colonists in line. These soldiers now needed places to stay, and because Motel 6 was not invented yet, a law called the Quartering Act of 1765 was established. This law forced colonists to feed British soldiers and allow them to live in their homes. The final issue that the British had to deal with was Pontiac's rebellion. Pontiac was an Ottawa war chief who despised the British and the colonists who were now pushing into his tribe's land after the French and Indian War. British troops were sent out to the former French forts to protect the newly acquired land. The British tried everything to stop the 3-year rebellion, including infecting the natives with blankets covered in smallpox. The British government ended up signing the Royal Proclamation of 1763 before a peace could be reached. This prevented colonists from settling any farther west than the Appalachian Mountains. Overall, the colonists did not like their post-war treatment. First off, they were promised by Prime Minister William Pitt that they would be repaid for their efforts in the French and Indian War, not held responsible for the costs of it. Second, the colonists still had to make a living for themselves. They were now being taxed at an extreme rate in their opinion and struggled to make a living. On top of that, many of the British soldiers that were left in the colonies ended up taking second jobs. This resulted in unemployment of colonists. Also, they struggled to smuggle cheaper goods into the country, thanks to the British soldiers being able to search and seize goods whenever they wanted. Third, after years of salutary neglect, the colonists had become accustomed to governing themselves. Leaving soldiers in the colony and controlling where they could settle in lands that they'd won in battle didn't sit well with them. In their opinions, they'd fought and died for this new land, and they should be able to live in it if they pleased. As a result, the colonists would attempt to gain back their independence and their ability to govern themselves. They turned to civil disobedience, protesting, and boycotting, hoping to regain this right. With that, the foundations of the American Revolution would be laid.